That wit is what makes Sandra one of Hollywood's most charismatic stars and earned her the nickname America's Sweetheart. But at home, she's best known as Mom.
Sandra Bullock seemed to have the perfect Hollywood life. She was America's sweetheart, one of the highest-paid actresses in the world, and an Academy Award winner whose films had grossed billions at the global box office. But while fans watched her accept Oscars and headline blockbuster movies, an entirely different story was unfolding behind closed doors. It began with a secret adoption. Along the way came years of secrecy, tabloid rumors, debates over transracial adoption, and renewed controversy. Yet through every triumph and every tragedy, Sandra Bullock made the same choice over and over again, protecting her children at all costs. And it paid off. Sandra Bullock's adopted son is unrecognizable after all these years. But to make any sense of it all, we need to start from the very beginning. At the peak of Hollywood, by the late 2000s, Sandra Bullock had become one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood, without relying on superheroes, franchises, or controversy. Forbes regularly ranked Bullock among Hollywood's highest-paid actresses, with annual earnings reaching tens of millions of dollars. She had become one of the rare stars whose name alone could sell tickets, regardless of genre. But then came 2009, the year that changed everything. In The Blind Side, Bullock portrayed Lee Ann Tuohy, the outspoken Memphis interior designer who welcomed future NFL player Michael O'Hare into her family. The film, based on Michael Lewis's best-selling book, became an enormous commercial success, grossing over $309 million worldwide against a budget of just $29 million. On March 7, 2010, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress at the 82nd Academy Awards. It was the crowning achievement of a career that had already spanned nearly 25 years. Yet, while the cameras captured her standing on Hollywood's biggest stage, almost no one knew that another, far more important chapter of her life had already begun behind closed doors. Away from the flashing lights and red carpets, Bullock had spent years pursuing something she rarely discussed publicly: motherhood, the secret adoption that changed everything. In 2005, while much of America watched the devastation of Hurricane Katrina unfold on television, Sandra Bullock was seeing something different. The storm had struck the Gulf Coast on August 29th, flooding roughly 80% of New Orleans, claiming more than 1,800 lives, and displacing hundreds of thousands of residents. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed, and thousands of children entered an already overwhelmed foster care system. Bullock later said Katrina profoundly changed her perspective. Along with her husband at the time, television personality and motorcycle builder Jesse James, she began discussing adoption, particularly from Louisiana. What started as a conversation soon became a commitment. Around 2006, the couple quietly entered the adoption process, making a decision they told almost no one about, not even many close friends. What followed was neither quick nor simple. The adoption process lasted nearly 4 years, involving extensive home studies, interviews, legal reviews, background checks, and coordination with Louisiana child welfare authorities. Throughout those years, Bullock's public life looked completely ordinary. She continued filming movies, attending premieres, and giving interviews while cameras followed her every move. Yet behind the scenes, one of Hollywood's biggest stars was living under extraordinary secrecy. Unlike celebrity pregnancies or high-profile adoptions that often generate weeks of tabloid coverage, Bullock deliberately built a wall of silence around the process. She later admitted that keeping everything private wasn't about creating suspense. It was about protecting a child before he even became part of her family. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Louis Bardo Bullock was born in New Orleans in 2009, and when he was around 3.5 months old, Sandra met him for the first time. She has described that meeting as one of immediate certainty, saying she instantly knew he belonged with her. Louis officially came home in January 2010, months before the world would even learn he existed. For Bullock, the timing was extraordinary. While entertainment reporters were focused on predicting Oscar winners and tracking her awards campaign for The Blind Side, she was adjusting to sleepless nights, diapers, bottles, and the routines of first-time motherhood. One life unfolded under the brightest lights in Hollywood. The other unfolded entirely behind closed doors. The secrecy became even more remarkable because January through March 2010 was arguably the busiest stretch of Bullock's entire career. The Blind Side had become a box office phenomenon, earning more than $309 million worldwide against a modest $29 million budget. Bullock was attending award ceremonies almost weekly, including the Golden Globes, the Screen Actors Guild Awards, the Critics' Choice Awards, and countless press events leading up to the Academy Awards. Yet, despite photographers following her across Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, and New York, virtually no one discovered that an infant was already living in her home. She later revealed that only a tiny circle of trusted family members, friends, and legal advisors knew about Louis, allowing her to enjoy the precious first months with him before the public inevitably caught on. Even Louis's name carried personal meaning. Bullock named him Louis in honor of legendary jazz pioneer Louis Armstrong, another famous son of New Orleans whose music became synonymous with hope, resilience, and the city's cultural identity. It was a quiet tribute to the city where her son had been born and to a figure whose legacy represented optimism despite hardship. The timing of the adoption also created one of the most striking ironies of her career. At the very moment, audiences around the world were celebrating her portrayal of Ligue Anne Tuohy, a woman who transformed a vulnerable young person's life through compassion and family. Bullock herself was living a remarkably similar emotional journey away from the cameras. While promoting a film about opening one's home to a child in need, she was secretly doing exactly that in real life. But then, the personal peace was disrupted. The scandal that changed everything overnight. On March 7, 2010, Sandra Bullock stood on the stage of the Dolby Theater, then known as the Kodak Theater, in Hollywood, holding the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in The Blind Side. It was the defining moment of a career that had taken more than 2 decades to build. Just 24 hours earlier, she had also accepted the Razzie Award for Worst Actress for All About Steve. But while Hollywood celebrated her greatest professional triumph, another story was already beginning to unravel. One that would soon eclipse every headline about her Oscar victory. Less than 2 weeks later, the entertainment world exploded. On March 17, 2010, In Touch Weekly published allegations that Jesse James, Bullock's husband of nearly 5 years, had engaged in an affair with tattoo model Michelle "Bombshell" McGee while Bullock was filming The Blind Side. The revelation dominated celebrity news almost instantly. Within days, additional women came forward claiming relationships with James during his marriage. Names including Melissa Smith, Brigitte Daguerre, and tattoo artist Kat Von D would all become linked to the controversy in one form or another. The story quickly snowballed into one of the biggest celebrity scandals of 2010, with television programs, newspapers, and magazines competing for new details almost hourly. For Bullock, the timing could not have been more devastating. She had been scheduled to attend the London premiere of The Blind Side on March 18th, but abruptly canceled her appearance and withdrew from public life altogether. Almost immediately, she left the Southern California home she had shared with James. Yet, there was another reason for her disappearance that the public did not yet understand. Hidden from virtually everyone outside her closest circle was Louis Bardo Bullock, then a 3.5-month-old baby. While photographers camped outside homes and reporters chased every rumor surrounding the marriage, Bullock's priority was to protect her son from becoming collateral damage. The scandal created an impossible dilemma. Bullock had originally planned to reveal Louis's adoption after awards season, introducing him to the world on her own terms. Instead, the collapse of her marriage forced those plans to change dramatically. Rather than allowing the story to emerge amid paparazzi speculation, she retreated completely from public view. For weeks, even many entertainment journalists covering the divorce had no idea a child was already living with her. On April 28, 2010, Bullock filed for divorce in Austin, Texas, citing conflict of personalities under Texas law. Around the same time, she publicly confirmed what had been Hollywood's best-kept secret. She had adopted Lewis. In an interview with People magazine, Bullock revealed that the adoption process had begun years earlier and that Lewis had already been living with her since January. More importantly, she announced that she would complete the adoption as a single parent. The marriage had ended, but motherhood would not. The child she had spent 4 years waiting for was not a casualty of the scandal. He became the reason she refused to let it define her future. Jesse James publicly apologized several times, admitting he had caused immense pain to his wife and family, though Bullock largely avoided discussing the details in interviews. Instead, she redirected public attention toward Lewis. Rather than responding to every allegation or participating in a prolonged public battle, she made a deliberate choice to focus on raising her son. Friends and colleagues later described how completely her priorities had shifted. Movie schedules, awards campaigns, and celebrity appearances suddenly mattered far less than creating stability for a baby who had entered her life at precisely the moment everything else was falling apart. Raising Lewis away from Hollywood. After finalizing Louis Bardo Bullock's adoption in 2010, Sandra Bullock became increasingly selective about accepting new projects. While she continued acting in major films such as Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, The Heat, Gravity, Minions, Ocean's 8, Bird Box, and The Lost City, long gaps between productions became the new normal. She repeatedly explained that work now revolved around her children rather than the other way around. If filming didn't fit their lives, the answer was simply no. Unlike many celebrity parents who introduce their children through magazine exclusives or social media, Bullock made the opposite choice. She refused to transform Lewis into a public figure. There were no carefully staged family photo shoots, no reality television opportunities, and no regular appearances on red carpets. In fact, Lewis has appeared publicly only a handful of times, usually because paparazzi photographed the family during everyday outings rather than official events. Bullock herself has never created public social media accounts, further limiting access to her private life. Protecting Lewis, however, meant more than keeping cameras away. As a black child growing up with a white mother, he would inevitably face questions and experiences that Bullock herself had never encountered. Rather than avoiding those conversations, she addressed them openly. In interviews, Bullock acknowledged that she had to educate herself continually about race and identity. Speaking on Red Table Talk in 2021, she said she sometimes wished she and her children shared the same skin color, not because she regretted adoption, but because it might make society treat them differently. She emphasized that she wanted Lewis to grow up proud of who he was while understanding the realities of racial bias in America. By 2015, another important person entered the family's life. Sandra began dating photographer Brian Randall after they reportedly met when he was hired to photograph Lewis's birthday party. Unlike Bullock's previous marriage, the relationship developed almost entirely away from public attention. Randall, a former model turned successful photographer, rarely gave interviews and largely avoided Hollywood events. Friends described him as calm, grounded, and devoted to family life. Over time, he became an important father figure to both Lewis and, eventually, Bullock's second adopted child. In December 2015, Bullock revealed that she had adopted a 3-year-old daughter named Layla through Louisiana's foster care system. Just as she had done with Lewis, Bullock kept the entire process secret until every legal requirement had been completed. Bullock later joked that living through the process felt like being in witness protection because everyone involved worked so hard to prevent information from leaking before the adoption was finalized. Only after the legal process concluded did she feel comfortable introducing Layla to the world. Bullock has also shared a touching detail about how the decision unfolded inside the family. According to her, it was Louis who repeatedly talked about having a younger sister before Layla arrived. She recalled him confidently saying a little girl would one day join their family, a prediction that became reality in 2015. Whether coincidence or intuition, Bullock has often described the moment as one of those remarkable family memories that stayed with her. She has also said that once Louis met Layla, he naturally embraced the role of protective older brother, helping ease her transition into a new home after spending time in foster care. Loss, grief, and Louis growing up. For nearly 8 years, the family maintained that privacy with remarkable success. While Bullock occasionally returned to the screen, she repeatedly emphasized that acting was no longer the center of her life. Then, without the public realizing it, another crisis emerged behind closed doors. Randall had been diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, commonly known as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. The diagnosis was kept entirely private. According to Randall's family, he chose not to disclose his illness publicly, and those closest to him respected that decision throughout his battle with the disease. As Randall's condition worsened, Bullock once again made a familiar choice. Family came first. In March 2022, while promoting The Lost City, she announced that she planned to take a break from acting because she wanted to be where she felt most happy, with her children and loved ones. At the time, many assumed she simply wanted time away after decades of non-stop work. Only later did it become clear that her decision had another deeply personal reason. Behind the scenes, Bullock was devoting much of her time to caring for Randall during the progression of his illness. On August 5, 2023, Brian Randall died at the age of 57 after living with ALS for 3 years. His family announced his passing in a brief statement that also revealed for the first time the private diagnosis he had chosen to keep out of the public eye. The death inevitably reshaped life at home. Although Bullock has not spoken extensively about how Louis and Layla processed Randall's passing, people close to the family have consistently described them as a close-knit unit. By then, Louis was entering his teenage years, while Layla was approaching adolescence herself. The children had known Randall for most of their lives, making his loss deeply personal. Rather than inviting media coverage into that painful chapter, Bullock continued to protect them from public scrutiny. But then, time marched on. Why Sandra Bullock's son looks unrecognizable after all these years. As Louis quietly grew older, curiosity about him only intensified because so little was known. Unlike many celebrity children, he had never attended movie premieres, walked red carpets, appeared in magazine photo shoots, or become a regular presence on social media. That made every rare sighting unusually valuable to celebrity photographers. In 2025 and early 2026, paparazzi captured a handful of candid photographs during ordinary family outings in Southern California, where Sandra Bullock was seen spending time with Louis and Layla. There was no public event, film premiere, or planned appearance, just routine moments outside restaurants, shopping areas, or while walking together. Yet those ordinary images quickly spread across entertainment websites around the world. The photographs themselves revealed nothing sensational. Louis had simply grown into adolescence. Standing nearly as tall as his mother, he appeared noticeably leaner and taller than in the few childhood images the public had seen years earlier. Dressed casually in hoodies, t-shirts, jeans, sneakers, and baseball caps, he looked like any other American teenager. There were no designer outfits, security entourages, or attempts to attract attention. In several photographs, he walked a step behind or beside Sandra, who continued her long-standing habit of shielding both children from photographers whenever possible. The family's relaxed appearance reflected the normal upbringing Bullock had worked so hard to preserve. The headlines, however, told a different story. Entertainment websites seized on phrases such as unrecognizable, transformation, and turning heads, implying some dramatic physical change. In reality, the interest stemmed almost entirely from the passage of time. The public had last seen Lewis regularly as a small child shortly after his adoption became public in 2010. 15 years later, he naturally looked like a 16-year-old rather than a toddler. The so-called transformation was simply adolescence compressed into a few rare photographs, because Sandra had spent more than a decade successfully keeping him out of the spotlight. Ironically, her determination to protect his privacy made every fleeting glimpse seem like a major event, even when the pictures captured nothing more extraordinary than a mother and her children going about their daily lives. In this case, a candid image of a 16-year-old walking beside his mother was enough for websites to generate millions of clicks, even though there was no dramatic revelation behind the photographs. The mystery existed largely because Bullock had spent years protecting her son's privacy. Those same click-driven stories often recycle details about Lewis's infancy that remain impossible to verify. Numerous articles claim he spent months hospitalized after a premature birth, that no biological relatives ever came forward, or that Bullock rescued him from extraordinarily tragic circumstances. While some of these claims have circulated for years, Sandra herself has never publicly confirmed many of them. Bullock's adoptions also sparked thoughtful public conversations about transracial adoption. As a white mother raising two black children, she has never suggested that love alone eliminates the challenges such families may face. Instead, she has openly acknowledged the importance of understanding race, identity, and the realities of discrimination in the United States. During a 2021 appearance on Red Table Talk, Bullock spoke candidly about educating herself so she could better support Lewis and Layla as they grew older. After stepping away from acting following The Lost City in 2022 and devoting much of her time to caring for Brian Randall during his battle with ALS, rumors of a comeback have surfaced regularly. Reports linking her to Practical Magic 2 alongside Nicole Kidman have fueled fresh excitement, while fans continue hoping for another collaboration with Keanu Reeves more than 3 decades after Speed. Yet Bullock herself has consistently signaled that any return will happen on her own terms, and only if it fits the life she has built outside Hollywood. That perspective may ultimately define her legacy more than any single performance. Sandra Bullock has starred in films that collectively earned billions of dollars worldwide, won an Academy Award, a Golden Globe, and numerous other honors, and spent years among the highest-paid actresses in the entertainment industry. Yet when she speaks about the most important role of her life, the conversation almost always returns to Lewis and Layla. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.